Good evening and welcome to Dateline 5 p.m. with me, Deepika. Your daily half-an-hour window that brings you an analysis of important international issues of the day. Well, today in Dateline 5 p.m., we'll bring you reports, analysis and explainers around the midterm elections that will be taking place in the US on the 8th of November. Now, midterm elections are being highlighted even more prominently this time, as not only they will decide Biden's agenda for presidential elections, but will be enveloped with important issues like abortion rights, climate change and crisis, economic policies and cost of living crisis. So in the next half an hour, we'll bring you news, reports and updates around all this, touching base with economy and abortion rights, two issues dominating political discourse in the USA. What does a midterm poll mean in the US? And also, why are these midterm elections important for Biden administration? First up, let's quickly begin with top headlines of the hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates the DEF Expo 2022, largest ever exhibition of weapons in defence and aerospace, lays foundation stone of Disa airfield in Gujarat, calls DEF Expo a symbol of new beginning where only Indian companies are participating and there are only made in India defence equipments. Prime Minister also launches mission DEF Space, says space technology is an example of what security will mean for any strong nation in the future, says space technology is shaping new definitions of India's generous space diplomacy. Prime Minister launches the mission Schools of Excellence, conceived with total outlay of 10,000 crores. The mission will help strengthen education infrastructure in Gujarat by setting up smart classrooms, computer labs and overall upgradation of the infrastructure. Abortion rights and state of the economy take centre stage in the US before the midterm polls. Trying to rally the party around the abortion rights, US President Joe Biden promised to sign a law to codify abortion rights in January if Democrats control the legislature next year. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres pays tribute to victims of 26/11 terror attacks at Hotel Taj Palace in Mumbai, says fighting terrorism should be the central priority of the UN and common responsibility of the world. Newly appointed commander of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, General Sergei Surovikin, calls the situation in the Kherson region very difficult, says civilians to be evacuated from the region as the use of HIMARS rockets by Ukrainian troops in hitting the city's infrastructure and housing. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba proposes to cut diplomatic ties with Iran after kamikaze drone attacks on Monday, but seemingly unperturbed, Iran promises to provide Russia with surface-to-surface missiles in addition to more drones. So those were the top headlines of the hour that we are tracking for all our viewers here on Dateline 5 p.m. Before we get on to the midterm elections, let's quickly give you what's happening in Russia and Ukraine crisis. Well, the new commander of Russian forces in Ukraine made a rare acknowledgement of the pressures they were under the Ukrainian offensives to retake southern and eastern areas that Moscow says it annexed just weeks ago. In another sign of Russian concern, the Kremlin installed chief of the strategic southern region of Kherson on Tuesday announced an organized gradual displacement of civilians from 4 towns on the Dnipro River. Sergei Surovikin, the Russian Air Force general now commanding Russia's invasion forces, said the situation in Kherson is difficult. The enemy is deliberately striking infrastructure and residential buildings. Russian forces in the Kherson region have been driven back by 20 to 30 kilometers in the last few weeks and are at risk of being pinned against the western bank of the 2,200 kilometers long Dnipro River that bisects Ukraine. He appeared to concede that there was a danger of Ukrainian forces advancing towards Kherson city near the mouth of the Dnipro on the west bank. Well, Russia captured the city in the early days of the invasion, and it remains the only major Ukrainian city that Moscow's forces have seized intact. Russian-backed officials have warned that an Ukrainian assault could be imminent. Vladimir Saldo, the Russian-installed Kherson region chief, said the risk of a Ukrainian attack had led to a decision to evacuate some civilians from 4 towns. And moving on, the Russian-installed deputy governor of Kherson region warned on Tuesday and Wednesday that a battle for the city could start in the near future as Ukraine now continues its offensives in the south of the country. Speaking in a video posted on his Telegram channel, Kirill Strimovsev said he could not rule out that Kherson and the western side of the Dnipro River would be shelled by advancing Ukrainian forces. He urged the civilian population to evacuate immediately, echoing comments from the Russian-installed governor, Vladimir Saldo. In another video posted on Wednesday, the 19th of October morning, Stremosov described the situation on the front line as stable and then repeated his call for speedy evacuation, saying the further the better, he said. Well, the midterm elections are next month in the US, with Democrats and the Republicans battling for control of the House and the Senate. And ahead of the midterm elections, inflation is putting pressure on the economy, with ordinary Americans facing higher food costs, steeper energy bills and rising interest rates. While economy will remain high on the agenda for the candidates, abortion rights will also be picked up. Take a look at our next report that brings you all details around the midterm elections in the US.
As voters begin casting early ballots ahead of the November 8th US midterm elections, the country is in the midst of a season of discontent. Inflation is putting pressure on the economy, with ordinary Americans facing higher food costs, steeper energy bills, and rising interest rates. The US Supreme Court overturned an almost 50-year precedent giving women the right to abortions, all of which is taking place against the backdrop of stubborn political polarization and a pandemic that has still not gone away. Meanwhile, the legacy of the attack on the US Capitol on January 6, 2021 by supporters of former President Donald Trump had led some analysts to fear that even the foundations of American democracy may be vulnerable. Others noted the breakdown in trust in society. Polls show 7 out of 10 Americans, both Republicans and Democrats, fear the other party will strip them of their rights.
Looking at some polls, both Republicans and Democrats, almost 7 in 10, say that if the other party wins this election, that they will have fewer rights and freedoms. And that's, I think, what causes people to get so divisive. They feel threatened. They feel fearful.
It is against this tumultuous backdrop that control of the US Congress is at stake in November's midterm elections, along with President Joe Biden's remaining policy agenda. Polls by Reuters, Ipsos and others continue to show the economy as the top concern of voters, outpacing other issues such as crime, immigration, abortion and the environment. Despite a sharp drop in unemployment, the economy remains plagued by rampant inflation. Even as the prices of some goods such as gasoline have come down, the Federal Reserve recently warned that it will still need to take aggressive steps to control inflation that could slow growth. Republicans stand a strong chance of taking control of the US House of Representatives, while Democrats have more hope of retaining a majority in the Senate. A Republican House would be enough to derail most legislation Biden and his fellow Democrats want to enact, likely spurring a wave of new congressional probes of the Biden administration. The party that wins the presidential election often gives up seats in the following congressional elections. Democratic President Barack Obama's party lost a devastating 63 seats in the 2010 election during his first term. In 2018, 2 years into Trump's presidency, the Republican Party gave up 41 House seats. In both cases, control of the chamber flipped. This year, Republicans only need to gain 4 seats to assume the majority in the 435-member chamber. Their prospects of winning those seats have been enhanced through gerrymandering, the practice by which one party manipulates congressional district lines to entrench its own power during the once-a-decade redistricting process. Republicans have muscled advantageous new maps through state houses they control, including in Texas and Florida, while Democrats in New York saw their own aggressive map invalidated by the state's High Court. Democrats have been buoyed by the fallout from the U.S. Supreme Court's decision overturning the constitutional abortion protections of Roe v. Wade, which has resulted in a surge of Democratic protest votes in a Kansas referendum and a series of House special elections. Unrest over the court decision seems to have erased Republicans' edge in voter enthusiasm.
When you're in a moment like we are now, where we've overturned a fundamental right that women in this country have enjoyed for 50 years, it's really hard to predict how much this is going to change the landscape.
Ekins of the CATO Institute said that polling shows indifference amongst Republicans on the abortion issue. Democrats, on the other hand, are fired up on the issue, she said. Democrats also hope that Trump's legal problems stemming from the recent FBI raid of his Florida home and continuing probes into his role in the push to overturn the 2020 election will make swing voters less inclined to support Republican candidates. Bureau Report, DD India.
Ahead of some U.S. midterm elections, U.S. President Joe Biden says he will sign a law to codify abortion rights in January if Democrats control the legislature next year. Biden also urged Americans to remember how they felt the day the court's decision was announced.
US President Joe Biden, under renewed pressure over high inflation with midterm elections approaching, said on Tuesday that he will sign a law to codify abortion rights in January if Democrats control the legislature next year. Biden's Democrats could lose control of the House of Representatives and possibly the Senate too in the November elections. He's trying to rally the party and its supporters around abortion rights, which were sharply curtailed by the Supreme Court's decision nearly 4 months ago to overturn the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. If Democrats elect more senators and keep control of the House of Representatives, Biden said he will sign a law codifying Roe in January to protect abortion rights.
Now, we're short a handful of votes. If you care about the right to choose, then you got to vote. That's why in these midterm elections are so critical to elect more Democratic senators to the United States Senate and more Democrats to keep control of the House of Representatives. And folks, if we do that, here's the promise I make to you and the American people. The first bill that I will send to the Congress will be to codify Roe v. Wade. And when Congress passes it, I'll sign it in January, 50 years after Roe was first decided the law of the land.
Biden also urged Americans to remember how they felt the day the court's decision was announced. During his remarks, the president also cited a part of the Supreme Court ruling that said women are not without electoral or political power, suggesting they could mobilize and elect lawmakers to guarantee abortion rights.
Let me tell you something. The court and the extreme Republicans who've spent decades trying to overturn Roe are about to find out.
Democrats currently have a slim majority in the House and control the 50-50 Senate through Vice President Kamala Harris's ability to cast tie-breaking votes. Passing such a bill could be difficult, even if Democrats hold on to their slim Senate majority, as that chamber's rules require 60 of the 100 senators to agree on most legislation. Bureau Report, DD India.
So So now let us quickly understand all about the midterm elections that are scheduled for the 8th of November. Let's understand through the help of this video wall. Well, in the US, midterm elections are held near the midpoint of president's 4-year term of office. Also, moving on, this year, midterm elections will be held on the 8th of November 2022. Well, moving on, Democrats and Republicans will battle it out for control of the House and the Senate in the midterm elections. Federal offices that are up for elections include all 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Moving on, 33 or 34 of the 100 seats in the U.S. Senate are there. And now let's take a look at what is the role of the Senate. Well, the Senate is the 100-strong upper chamber. Each U.S. state, regardless of its size, sends 2 representatives at the Senate. Now, further on, these senators are elected for 6-year terms. And every 2 years, a third of the Senate faces re-elections. And now let's also talk about what is there in the House of Representatives. Well, the House of Representatives, often referred to as the House, has around 435 members. Further on, each one represents a particular district and serves for a 2-year term. Also, all the seats are up for election in the House of Representatives, unlike the Senate. And now it also becomes important to know why these midterm elections are so much important. To understand that, well, look, let's take a look here. The US Constitution has set up a system of checks and balances. Now, moving on, it is done by vesting powers in the president and the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. Also, control of Congress and the White House has implications for how well these checks and balances will actually work. And now the results will determine the 118th U.S. Congress, and the results will also determine the future of Joe Biden's legislative agenda. So this is why these elections, midterm US elections, becomes important. And now let's also take a look at top number of issues which will remain on top of the agenda for the candidates who will be contesting at the midterm elections through the help of these graphics. Economy. America's troubled economy has been major issue, with inflation a worry for many Americans. Abortion rights, as this was in the news, and more than ever amid massive protest, this is gaining more eyeballs. COVID-19 pandemic. So Biden government has been facing widespread criticism over its handling of COVID-19 also. Gun control and security. America has a history of mass shootings, and gun control remains a major issue. Also, climate policy is there. The main climate target of Biden administration is to reduce greenhouse emissions by 2050 to net zero. Economy, as we discussed, also remains there on the agenda. So these are the key issues that remains on the agenda for all the candidates who will be contesting for the midterm elections to take control. And now to discuss more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Ashok Sharma, who is the visiting fellow, Strategic and Defence Studies Centre at the Australian National University. Good evening. Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma, for joining us and to discuss more on the important midterm US election.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sharma, the fight between the Republicans and the Democrats keeps on intensifying, and both have their own presentations as well as pitches on similar agendas that we just mentioned. Starting with abortion rights, who seems to back the confidence this time?
I think it's this has obviously has given a kind of a boost to Democrats because a lot of women, have rallied behind Democrats. And if you look at this before 2020, many women had left Democrats and they have returned back. And there are many women have, activated in the state elections in different states. So this has given a boost to Biden party, Democrats, especially this right to abortion, which, in June 2022, right-wing majority of the Supreme Court has, overturned this decision, which has been there for more than 40 years, since 1973. Roe versus Wade, Cassidy in 1992, Cassidy versus that permanent that case. So it's obviously it's a given an advantage to, on this front, this Biden's party, Democrats will have an advantage over Republicans. So this is a kind of a boost. Given Biden's, declining profile, like overall was declining, but on the issue of especially economy and growing crimes and the border violence, immigration, all that issues. So it has definitely given a boost to Democrats in the midterm election.
Now, these elections are also important for Biden, and ahead of the elections, Joe Biden is all set to announce release of up to 15 million barrels of oil from Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, how would you assess this move, Dr. Sharma?
I think it's obviously Biden is trying to, boost his potentials for, the next election, and it is obviously always a kind of, this is in the mid of the presidential election. So this is a kind of a step which would, ensure Biden's Biden or Democrat re-election in the coming years. So I think it is he's announced before this elections also to control that, the edge, control the Republicans' edge over these issues, inflation and rising food and energy prices, which Biden has been doing, and he's been blaming it on the Ukrainian crisis. And on that front also, again, Trump's alleged connection with Russia is also being highlighted. So I think it's a move by Biden to boost his party candidate prospects in the election.
Absolutely, and amid all this, how would you assess Joe Biden's positioning, and also how is Joe Biden's positioning is going to affect the elections this time?
Look, if you look at the history, incumbent president's party, they don't win the midterm election, if you look at this. And at the moment, Democrats are in the majority in the Senate just by, Vice President can only use her vote because it's divided 50-50. So just one vote by, then only they can win. So a very thin majority. Even in the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives, 220 Democrats are holding, and 212 is Republican, are Republicans. So I think it's a kind of a very contested election, very polarized election, and American society has been polarized politically in many terms, and both the parties are not coming on one issue. They are trying to raise their issues, on which they think that they are strong. And so they are not coming on only on economic issue. If you look at the entire thing, you will see that Joe Biden has replied. Joe Biden has replied to Republicans' criticism. Otherwise, they have been highlighting on these abortion right issues, and Republicans have been highlighting the rising crime and border issues, immigration issues, and number of mass shootings has also given a boost to Democrats. So both the parties are trying to raise the issues on which they feel that they are strong, and obviously it's not a it's a localized issues also there in different states, so they also become important in this election.
Absolutely, Dr. Sharma. When we talk about the issues, economy is one such issue which has become really painful, not only for the US but for the UK also. We saw the tremors in the UK, and now US is also just moving towards the midterm elections. How do you think both the parties would respond, and also how they should respond to the current economic situation?
Look, this is Biden has confessed that economy is going to be in recession, and Republicans are saying that the rising inflation is because of Biden's, given too much money for this pandemic relief, and Republicans have been blaming that you have given too much money and it has cost the economy like this. So there are different reasons are being cited by this. So I'm not an economist. I can't comment on this, especially how economy is going to boost. But what I'm trying to say is that what I can see is that economy has become an issue, and the rising inflation is an issue where Republicans are trying to target Biden administration, and they are blaming them on the pandemic relief fund, which was excessive, and Biden administration is trying to dose it by saying that the Ukrainian conflict is, and which is again connected with the Russian connection of Trump, and because of the rising inflation. So I think this is an issue which has come, and where Biden is the Democrats are weak and Republicans have a bit of edge over that, right. And this is going to be an issue in the coming years, which either of the parties will have to deal if they with the election.
And how, Dr. Sharma, is the entire permutation and combination of these elections going to affect the markets?
Look, if there is one issue which America has been facing, is that it's a constitutional deadlock, political deadlock between, in the US Congress. And if there is a Republican majority, which is likely to be, if you see the trends, but just because of abortion rights and mass voting, which has happened, and seems to be 70% people supporting Democrats' view, if they manage a majority in both the houses, then there is going to be it will be good. But if Congress which is likely to be the majority of either, most probably in the Senate, Republicans, then there is likely to be a kind of mess, and that will affect overall America's ability to handle many of the issues, and its global impact would be also felt, because it will be Congress will be not able to take right decision on many of the issues. So this is crucial. This election is crucial, and it will have a far-reaching, impact on in the coming years, not only in America but even in the global context.
And also, very importantly, Dr. Ashok, social media platform TikTok has announced that it will teach its users on how to take on the news around the midterm US elections. Now, how would you assess this communication move?
Look, it has been an important. It has been playing an important role, and social media has been playing an important role in the U.S. election, and it's all about. And I see it's going to be very important in the election. That's what I can say, that social media has been important, and obviously, American elections are. It's not only by America; it's watched by the whole world. So
absolutely,
it's going to be an important factor in the U.S. election outcome.
So not only social media, word of mouth also becomes important over here for a sensible approach towards the midterm US elections. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ashok, for joining us and bringing us a rounded perspective on the upcoming US midterm elections, which are scheduled for the 8th of November. It is here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pan.
And with this, it's a wrap in Dateline 5 p.m. with me, Deepika, but we'll keep bringing you latest news and updates from and the world on the latest issues. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching and keep tracking DD India. Namaskar.